Dive into the wild, world-changing stories of the early church and ask all the questions you didn't know you had.
Hi, I'm Sharon Hobbs. I'm a teacher, a lover of all things scriptural, and I am so excited to have a conversation about Acts every week. Together, we'll explore the book of Acts, not as a dusty piece of history, but as a living, breathing story of God's power, his people, and his purposes, where discovery meets faith and theology meets real life.
Welcome back to Wait, That's in Acts. We are here with Miss Sharon. This is her gig. I'm just a guest. But we are in chapter 9. So
we're going to finish chapter. I promise you.
It only took 3 episodes, but it was good. But yes, we've seen Saul get met on the road to Damascus.
He got blind and he got sight. Now he's got the
and now
Holy
he's
Ghost.
Escaped persecution
That's
out
right.
of Damascus, and we're heading into Jerusalem.
That's right.
So
it's a long journey.
But we're getting there. So I'm going to start reading in verse 26, and then we're going to learn from Sharon all the little nuggets. And when he had come to Jerusalem, he attempted to join the disciples, and they were all afraid of him, for they did not believe that he was a disciple. But Barnabas took him and brought him to the apostles and declared to them how on the road he had seen the Lord who spoke to him, and how at Damascus he had preached boldly in the name of Jesus. So he went in and out among them at Jerusalem, preaching boldly in the name of the Lord. And he spoke and disputed against the Hellenists, but they were seeking to kill him. And when the brothers learned this, they brought him down to Caesarea and sent him off to Tarsus. So the church throughout all Judea and Galilee and Samaria had peace and was being built up, and walking in the fear of the Lord and in the comfort of the Holy Spirit, it multiplied.
Okay, so we're going to jump back just a little bit and try to understand the timeline, okay? And you have to piece it together from other scriptures. We've read those in the first session, so if you haven't looked at those, go back to the first session on chapter 9. But we have a compressed timeline here. In verse 19, he is with the believers, right? Then in verse 20, we see a very short season in Damascus where he is zealously preaching to the Jews and stirring up trouble, which eventually they use the Romans, which we mentioned last week, to try to capture him. And then there's this longer period where he preaches Christ in verse 23, the hostile reaction of the Jews. And then verse 26 mentions Jerusalem. But that whole timeline is really a 3-year time period, okay? And you find that in Galatians 1:17 through 18. It kind of gives you his account of when he went to Jerusalem, who he met. When he went to Jerusalem, now Saul, was from Tarsus, okay? Tarsus was a Hellenistic city. He was a Roman citizen, in fact, because he was born in Tarsus. So in the Jewish synagogues, often the Hellenists that were, even though they were Jews, they obeyed the Jews' dietary laws, all the stuff, but they were considered not as privileged as the Jerusalem or Israelite Jews. Right. And so they were probably pretty separate, even though they might have been in the same synagogue, or maybe they were in synagogues that were mostly Hellenists. In their situation, you probably had the Hellenists were hanging with the Hellenists, and the Jerusalem Jews were hanging with the Jerusalem Jews.
Well, so, and in that culture, everyone was very much divided. Like, you didn't
much more than us.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we're divided enough.
Right.
You know, but they were,
even more so.
Yeah, they were even more so. So when he came into Jerusalem, he probably was with the Hellenists, especially because Bren and all of the elites had totally rejected him, right? So he would have taken his life into his own hands had he tried to really preach to the Sanhedrin Jews, the elites, right? And so he was in the Christian fellowship in Jerusalem. He met Barnabas there, or he became connected, brought in by Barnabas. Now, Barnabas was from Cyprus, okay? Cyprus was also a Hellenist city.
Okay.
I'm making an assumption here, but it's likely that Barnabas at least possibly witnessed some of Paul's ministry in Damascus. And if not, he probably at least had connections to people who had.
Yes.
All right. So Barnabas in some way knew about Paul, even if he didn't really directly know him until he came into Jerusalem.
At the very least, he at least sympathized with him because he came from the same background and is now a follower of the way.
Right.
And had an understanding.
Exactly. And so Barnabas means son of consolation. Barnabas is a nickname, if you want to call it that, or a given changed name for a man whose original name was Simeon. They called him that because that was his identity. Okay. He was a bridge builder. He was a connect and bring in people person. That was just his calling. And we see him do that over and over and over. We see him do that even after he and Paul, and we'll talk about this, 2 or 3 chapters down the line, where he and Paul started out together. And then Paul, in his personality, is real strict. And so he ends up cutting John Mark off, right? Because John Mark didn't perform as perfectly as he wanted him to.
Yeah.
But Barnabas, he didn't cut John Mark off. He drew him in. He mentored him into a man that Paul eventually says, bring John Mark with you because he is profitable to me, So that was the call of Barnabas.
Yes.
That's just an extra nugget for us.
Yes.
But Barnabas takes Saul in, right? And he becomes a bridge, and he becomes a witness for Saul that, yes, this conversion is true, because the Jews were afraid that it was all ruse, that he was going to come in and try and decimate the mother church in Jerusalem.
Understandably
Oh,
so.
absolutely.
I mean, he had quite the reputation.
That's right. And so Barnabas is the bridge that connects them and kind of protects Paul and helps make a space. Now it says that Barnabas brings him to the apostles. And yet we see from Galatians that he only really met Peter and James. James was the head of the church in Jerusalem. James was the brother of Jesus. And after he came to saving faith, after the resurrection of Jesus Christ, not before, then he became the leader, actually, of the Jerusalem church. Sometimes I think people ask or think, well, why weren't the apostles the Jerusalem church leader? But the apostles were called to be sent ones.
Yes.
They were called to spread the gospel out into all of the known world, right?
Well, the same as apostles today.
Exactly.
That's exactly what they do. And then they equip others and send them out.
Right. And James, he was called to be bishop. You know, that was the word that they used, but he was the connecting senior pastor in Jerusalem that kept everything there held together,
Yes.
right? And so Barnabas brings Saul to Peter, who is the head apostle, and James, who is head of the church in Jerusalem. So that's who he met when he went to Jerusalem. And we see that he tells the Galatians that he was only there for like half a month, you know, for a short period of time, just to get to know them, not to absorb their gospel. God intentionally set it up that he was not received by the whole church in Jerusalem because he did not want Saul to go and come under this Jewish church setup.
Yes.
He wanted Saul to be trained directly by himself. You know, we think, oh, persecution can't be good. It's never good.
Right.
But God uses stuff.
Absolutely.
Right? So God used this rejection by the Jews in Jerusalem to send Paul out and back to Tarsus, where then Paul, for a period of time, was really trained by God, and then eventually was sent to Antioch. And we see that almost all of Saul, who becomes Paul, his ministry is based out of Antioch because Antioch was the primary center for the Gentile churches. And Paul's primary call is always going to be to the Gentiles.
Yes.
Okay. So Barnabas covers Paul and mentors Paul, becomes that bridge, and is Paul's first missionary partner eventually when he goes out, until Paul becomes the stronger missionary than Barnabas. I think that covers our space, right?
Covers the Paul.
Okay.
We won't see him again till what, chapter 13?
Chapter 13. That's right. So we're going back in the history, the story, and we're going to follow Peter. Because when you look at the book of Acts, Peter and Paul are the two principal characters, you know, apostles in the history of the book of Acts. Now, that does not discount all of the other apostles who went out into various different parts of the Roman Empire and established churches, did ministry. We don't know their stories biblically. We know some of their stories historically from other records, etc. But the reason I think that Luke writes, when he writes Acts, this history following Peter and Paul is because Peter was the first and primary leader of the apostles to the Jews, right? And then Paul was the primary apostle to the Gentiles.
Yes.
And so you get the picture of the growth of the church between these two. And the rest are, you know, the expansion of the church that we don't really see, but the history that's essential, Luke shows us through these two leaders. And the fact that Peter leads up to the place where the church becomes bigger than the Israelite people. It becomes the Christian people. It fulfills the verse into Samaria and into the uttermost parts of the earth, the calling that was given.
And just like you said in the last episode, it's, all of your obedience or your story or your ministry is not always noticed or record it. So we know that there's a whole group of people behind the scenes doing.
Won't it be fun in heaven when we hear everybody's stories?
I want to hear all the accounts because goodness gracious, if we had all the accounts, our Bible would be so massive. I don't even know if we'd ever get through it.
No, you couldn't. Even John says there's not enough books to write everything that Jesus Christ did.
Yes.
Let alone the expansion of everybody that all of the believers did.
Yes.
There are books and books and books in heaven written about every one of our stories.
I cannot wait.
Me either. Okay, so let's jump back to verse 32.
All right, here we go. Verse 32. Now, as Peter went here and there among them all, he came down also to the saints who lived in Lydda. There he found a man named Aeneas, bedridden for 8 years, who was paralyzed. And Peter said to him, Aeneas, Jesus Christ heals you. Rise and make your bed. And immediately he rose, and all the residents of Lydda and Sharon saw him, and they turned to the Lord.
Here we see, when we're going back to Peter, we see the expansion and the work of the kingdom, because the kingdom is not just the gospel of salvation. The kingdom is the entire life of Christ lived out here and now.
Yes.
And so part of the process of salvation is signs, wonders, and miracles, is healings, right? Mm-hmm. And the word tells us that signs and healings and miracles follow the believers.
That's right.
Right? These are tools. These are ways of showing the compassion of Jesus Christ. Mm-hmm. The fact that Jesus loves you. Jesus wants good for you, and Jesus has authority and power over every plan of the enemy. The enemy is always about kill, steal, and destroy.
That's right.
And he uses sickness. He uses injury. He uses every kind of circumstance, financial destruction, anything he can use against us, he will to try and kill, steal, or destroy.
Satan does do that. Like, he is trying to get you to doubt all things God, trying to get you to question, be double-minded.
And he always lies to you and tells you that, that must be God.
And then God, on the other hand, he has these signs following his believers. This is how you will know they are my people, by doing these things. So in seeing these signs, it's a faith builder. It's the exact opposite of what the enemy's trying to do when he attacks us. And so of course, God is so intentional on all things, but I love that God is what he is. Satan's trying to counteract what God is.
But the counteract of Satan never is powerful enough to overcome God. We don't always see God working out in our timeline, in our ways, instantly.
Yeah.
We talked about how we love to be the instant thing. God's not always that, but he never wastes anything.
That's right.
All the time that's invested in the accomplishing of his will is to our benefit.
Yeah.
We don't see it immediately, but it eventually, almost always, we will even recognize, now I see why that was. That's why I do believe that the longer you serve God, or at least for me in my life, I have found the longer I serve God, the easier serving God is.
Yes.
Because I have a whole history of God's faithfulness, a whole history of, I had to wait for this, but it was worth it. I had to wait for this, but I see now why that worked out that way. So I have all of that history to apply to today. and say, if I have to wait for something, that's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You know.
that's right.
You just know he's going to
I mean,
do what he promises.
Aeneas waited 8 years.
Yes.
He waited 8 years, but then, he immediately was healed.
Oh my God.
We say immediately, but it wasn't immediate because it was 8 years worth of time.
We get so impatient. I'm sitting here thinking of a couple situations in my life where it may have been 6 months here, or there's another thing a couple years later. I went through infertility for 4 years. So I start thinking back as stories in the Bible, like the Israelites wandering in the wilderness. I didn't have to wait that long.
Right.
The woman with the issue of blood.
Neither would they have had to wait that long.
Yeah, the woman with the issue of blood, 12 years later, finding her healing.
Yeah.
It's just so encouraging seeing people who faithfully believed and stood in faith for what was coming. Even if they might have grumbled a little bit, even if they might have got impatient, God always used that and fulfilled what he promised.
So Peter here uses this tool to preach the gospel.
Yes.
And I believe that we are coming into a season in the church body that we are going to see more and more and more signs, wonders, and miracles, healings that are used to preach the gospel.
I agree.
I really do think that that's coming. I know that it's common for people to say, well, we see those in other nations, but we don't really see them in the United States. Partially because we have healthcare that we always go to get an answer, right? Mm-hmm. They probably didn't have nearly as much answers, and maybe they went to healthcare. Mm-hmm. They went to doctors. They went to somebody and didn't see a solution for their problem. I mean, plenty of us go to doctors, and I'm not saying not to go to doctors, because for sure, that's a good idea. But don't put all your faith in doctors. Right. Still seek God for your healing, because he is a healer.
Absolutely. I think we're showing our privilege. Like, we take for granted that we have all this easily accessible at our fingertips. And it's easy to reach for that bottle of Tylenol to take it for a headache instead of laying hands on our head and like, God, I know that
you're the healer
and that you have healed me in your name. Like,
that's right.
That how easy it is to just have that convenience that we are so used to, instead of reminding ourselves.
We culturally trained ourselves to trust in doctors and forgetting that there is a great physician. Okay, so Aeneas, Jesus Christ heals you. It's important to remember. Peter didn't say, I heal you.
That's right.
I mean, Peter was the vessel through which Jesus Christ moved, and that's our job, to be the hands and feet of Jesus.
Yes.
But he pointed to the power of Jesus Christ, who was the healer. Okay, so then verse 36.
36. Now there was in Joppa a disciple named Tabitha, which translated means Dorcas. She was full of good works and acts of charity. In those days she became ill and died, and when they had washed her, they laid her in an upper room. Since Lydda was near Joppa, the disciples, hearing that Peter was there, sent 2 men to him, urging him, please come to us without delay. So Peter rose, went with them, and when he arrived, they took him to the upper room. All the widows stood beside him, weeping and showing tunics and other garments that Dorcas made while she was with them. But Peter put them all outside and knelt down and prayed. And turning to the body, he said, Tabitha, arise. And she opened her eyes, and when she saw Peter, she sat up, and he gave her his hand and raised her up. Then calling the saints and widows, he presented her alive, and it became known throughout all of Joppa, and many believed in the Lord. And he stayed in Joppa for many days with one Simon, a tanner.
Here we see another example of the power of Jesus Christ moving, right? So he is in Lydda and he's called down to Joppa, and that's about 20 miles that he travels down to Joppa. And we see that Dorcas, or Tabitha, Dorcas was her Greek name and Tabitha was her Hebrew name. So she's obviously a Hellenistic Jew, right here in Joppa. She's gifted seamstress, right? So she has made garments. She's served God and they're giving honor. They are calling for him. Not that they think, oh, well, he can come raise her from the dead, but, she's a believer. And so they are calling for him to come and comfort, I think.
Yeah, minister and grief.
Right. And yet when he comes in, he is not all about comforting the widows.
No.
He's like, oh, okay, I see that has these gifts and, this is wonderful. And, now you guys go out here. And it reminds me of when Jesus was healing and he comes in and the little girl is dead and they all are weeping. And he says, she's asleep. And now you guys all go out there. And he only takes those that have faith. Right?
Right. Very important.
And so he puts out all of those that are not able to connect with his faith because he has faith.
Yeah.
Right? But we have to protect our faith in the same way. We can't let everybody participate with us in their doubt.
Yes.
And that's not to be cruel or mean. I mean, I don't think Peter was, he was just controlling the circumstance and the situation.
That's right.
So that faith could operate, right?
Well, and bring in some peace to the situation, because when you have the mourners that are wailing and doing,
and they did.
Yeah, that's what they did. So it's very chaotic, very noisy. And he's just like, no, we need. And he immediately went into prayer.
That's right.
And so he needed that to be alone with all
he needed to hear
steps of what that assignment's going to be.
Hear the Spirit, right?
Mm-hmm.
So Peter sent them out and knelt down and prayed, and turning to the body, he said, Tabitha, arise. Just like Jesus calling Lazarus out of the grave. And who knows, if it had been me, I'd have been praying in the Spirit and I'd have been communing in my spirit with God. How do you want me to approach this situation?
Yes.
Yeah. What's my steps? But when he spoke, he commanded.
Yep.
He didn't ask God, would you please raise this body up? He commanded. He declared. And I think that that's a failure that many people have in the body, is that they don't take their authority.
Well, they come as beggars, not as royalty.
Right. Exactly.
We are part of the royal family.
Yeah. And, and the Spirit of God that lives within us accomplishes the work, that does have the power. He's above everything.
That's right.
And we are just the mouthpiece. We are just the body that carries him place to place to place.
Yeah.
Right?
Humble obedience.
That's
all
right.
That's required. Yeah.
So he spoke, he commanded. Mm-hmm. She opened her eyes, and when she saw Peter, she sat up, and he gave her his hand. So he was participating, right? Meeting her action, right? So he was there, his body, his voice commanded, and his body participated in her stepping into that fullness, right? And then he presented her alive to the mourners and the rest of the people. Like every miracle and healing does, it spread the gospel.
Oh, yeah. Word got out real quick. Like,
That's
you won't
right.
believe what I saw.
Yeah, exactly. She was dead. She
Yes.
was dead. The interesting thing is they probably knew the story of Jesus raising Lazarus.
And the little girl, even, like that news. I'm sure that rumor mill went out pretty quick.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
And now they can say, not only Jesus, but
Yes.
Peter did. And Peter's a man just like us.
Yes.
He's not the son of God. He's just a believer. Granted, he's a leader and a great man, but if he can do it, maybe I can do it too.
And I'm sure that was some of what he shared with them.
I'm
like,
sure it
this
was.
isn't me. I mean, everyone, you hear it like, oh, not me. It was all God.
Right.
So you know that was part of what he was having
Yeah,
conversations.
when he stayed and taught them. So that's what we're called to do. We're
Yes.
called to walk in the authority, the power of the Spirit that lives within us. You know, people say, oh, well, I want to be humble. Humility is obedience.
That's right.
Humility is not groveling.
No.
Humility is not discounting the authority or power of God that lives within you.
No.
It's not taking God's glory.
That's
Granted, it's proclaiming Jesus made you well. You know, Jesus raised you up. But I carry Jesus.
That's right.
So I have the responsibility to yield to that power of Jesus in me to accomplish his work and his will, spread the gospel, prove the power and authority of the gospel.
And as it says, those signs will follow you. So
That's
you're
right.
believers. It
So
lays it all
operate
out.
like-
It's all part of the Great Commission. Go out and make disciples, and then it will say they will know who you are because you're laying hands and people are getting healed. You're calling out demons. You're
These signs shall follow
all
those
things.
that believe.
believe. So good. Thank you so much. We got through chapter
Chapter
9,
nine.
3 episodes later, and we're finally there. So we'll see you next week.
Okay,
on
maybe
chapter 10.
maybe at the church or maybe in my office.
It all works.
Blessings to you all.
Yes.
Thanks for being part of our study in Acts.
Well, that wraps up today's episode of Wait, That's an Axe? Where
Together, we uncover just how wild, surprising, and inspiring the book of Acts really is.
if you learned something new, laughed a little, or had one of those, wait, that's in there moments, share this episode with a friend.
And you can find more conversation, notes, and upcoming topics wherever you get your podcasts.
Until next time.
Keep asking questions, keep discovering the God